Welcome to Camp Stone, West Coast branch. My name is Yitzchak Etshalom, and my wife and I are the proud parents of 5 out of 5 Camp Stone devotees. Our children have been impacted so powerfully by the lessons of Camp Stone, by the spirit of Camp Stone. If we were to put it into one small vignette, the easiest thing would be to explain it this way. When people this week asked me where Roni is, and I said, oh, Roni's up at camp. I said, what do you mean? All the camps are closed. I briefly explained how Indoor World was working. And they said, where is this? I said, Camp Stone. Those who knew immediately smiled knowingly and said, Camp Stone. Of course, we understand that at Camp Stone, we go 1, 10, 1,000, 1,000,000 steps further in order to ensure proper education for every Jewish child. And if that means bringing 45 of our staff to camp to be able to create Indoor World and to educate via Zoom, that's what we do. And that's how Camp Stone has continued to impact so positively with education, with religious experiences, with social experiences. The friendships that are made at camp are friendships forever, and the lessons that our kids learn are lessons that they internalize and elevate them and make them real B'nai and B'not Torah. We're just so proud to be part of the Camp Stone family and so excited about Indoor World. This week we're reading Parashat Korach here in Chutz La'aretz, and Parashat Korach is an example of a problem that we have in Sefer Bamidbar, because if you look through the stories in Sefer Bamidbar, some of the stories in Parashat Shlach, certainly the stories in Parashat Korach, perhaps even some of the stories in Parashat Chukat, they seem to be out of order. In other words, Sefer Bamidbar is not presented chronologically. There are things that happen in the beginning of Bamidbar that seem to have happened back in Shemot. There are things that happen in the later part of Bamidbar that seem to happen earlier. So since Bamidbar is not presented chronologically, we've got to ask, what's the thinking behind the order? What is the logic and what is the lesson behind the unique order of Sefer Bamidbar? We take a look at it, we step back, and the real cross point in Sefer Bamidbar is in the middle of Parshat Bahalotcha. For the first 10 chapters of Bahalotcha, of Bamidbar, which are Bamidbar, Naso, and the beginning of the first half of Bahalotcha, everything is great. Everything is fantastic. We're doing a census. We're setting up the army to march together. We're setting up describing the Chanukah HaMizbeach, talking about Korban Pesach and the opportunity of Pesach Sheni, setting up the Chatzot Tzrot, the cornets that are going to be blown to announce that we're moving. It's all glorious, and it culminates with those two amazing psukim, Vayihi b'nso Aaron v'yomer Moshe, psukim that, by the way, never happened. Vayihi b'nso Aaron v'yomer Moshe means when Aaron would go out, Moshe would say, Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusu mesanecha mipanecha. That's the image. That's what we hoped would happen. Moshe would lead us into war in Eretz Yisrael to help conquer Eretz Yisrael. And then, and then when they would bring the Aron back, he would say, Shuva Adonai v'otavei Yisrael, bring the soldiers back safely. Then there are those upside down nuns. And from that point on, everything spirals downhill. But again, everything spiraling downhill didn't necessarily happen afterwards. For instance, according to the Ibn Ezra, the story of Korach happened way back at the beginning of Bamidbar when the swap for the Levim and the Bechorot happened. According to some Rishonim, even the story of Moshe hitting the rock, which looks like it happens at the end of 40 years, is really the story that happened back in Shemot. So what's the lesson of Bamidbar and of this order? The lesson is the same lesson that Chazal used as an explanation for the two stories of creation. You look at Breshit Aleph, you hear one story of creation. You open up Breshit Bet, you hear another one. And Chazal famously in the Midrash understood that the first story of creation should be understood as a model, as an ideal, as a blueprint. Chazal said as follows, B'tchila ala b'machshava livro ta'olam b'midat hadin. Originally, God wanted to create the world according to strict justice. That's why the name for God used in the first story is Elohim. Ra'ah she'ein ha'olam mitkayem. God saw that the world could not stand according to strict justice. Shitef imo midat harachamim. He made a partner out of compassion, and that's why the name used for God in the second story is Hashem Elokim. It's compassion and justice. It's not obliterating justice, but it's justice that's mitigated by compassion. In other words, the story we read at the beginning, Bereshit bara Elohim, the 6 days or the 7 days, that's a model, that's an image, that's an ideal. The story that we read in the second chapter is what actually happened. And Chazal say this in a few different ways. You see the same thing in Bamidbar. The first 10 chapters are their deal. The ultimate image of Bnei Yisrael marching as a unified army, everyone in their own camp, Ish al Machaneo v'ish al Diglo, Tzivotam, until we come into Eretz Yisrael, led by Moshe and the Aaron. That's the ideal. The real starts in Perek Yud Aleph. The reality is people complain. The reality is people get scared. The reality is people get bored. The reality is we have a rebellion. The reality is that even our leaders sometimes are not perfect. So that's the reality. What's the value of that? It's a lesson that Torah constantly teaches us, that in order for us to succeed at what we want to do, we always have to keep our eye on the goal, our eye on the ideal, and keep the ideal there as a goal to get to, and let it drive us through all of the difficult times. In this very unusual spring, and this very challenging summer, when so many of our kids, thousands, tens of thousands of our kids, were planning to go away either for a trip to Israel or to summer camp, and suddenly we started realizing in May, and by the end of May, that summer camps weren't really going to happen. That's the difficulty. Campstone always keeps its eye on the ideal. Campstone always keeps its eye on the goal. And that drives Yaakov and Esti and Lisa and all of our wonderful administrative staff, all of the wonderful madrichim, everybody associated with the camp, and the board that does so much to support. It drives everyone to make sure that we do everything we can to keep our eye on the goal, to work towards it, and in Yirtzeh Hashem next year to be able to have a full Machaneh stone for two full beautiful sessions in Yirtzeh Hashem. Everyone should have a Shabbat Shalom.